Hello everybody, welcome to KENTY BLITZ. I'm Ben Ikin together with Paul Kent from KENTY BLITZ. Hey?
That's right.
This is your show.
My show, yeah. It's a new beginning, mate.
Yeah. So where were we?
Yeah, exactly. Where were
4
we?
years ago?
4 years ago. Well, I did get out of town pretty quickly back then, so we probably got some things we can catch up on.
Yeah. So I've been watching the show. I've been enjoying it. You're always across the news, which is great. So if I need a freshening up at the end of the day.
Well, you are the news now. So
yeah, that's right.
That's going to help as well.
You haven't had a crack at me when I haven't been watching, have you?
Well, no, I haven't actually, but yeah, day ain't over yet.
Okay, that's enough catching up. Let's rip into the news, which is your area of expertise. And the big story breaking today is we're going back to Vegas with 4 new teams. So the Bulldogs, the Knights, the Dragons and the Cowboys. I think Leeds and Hull KR are the two Super League sides.
Yeah, look, the NRL's made the decision to go back. Obviously, look, it had been around who the 4 teams are. The Bulldogs fans got shits with me already about it because I kind of queried in the lead up to the announcement whether the NRL were picking the right teams. Obviously, the Bulldogs I think are a right team and they are a travelling team, but I just also think I don't know about the Knights being one of the right teams to bring over there.
Can I just ask what are the guidelines you're using to determine what are the right teams according to Paul Kent?
Entertaining football.
So
and you're going to put the Knights in there.
So you're basing that on the first 10 rounds of 2025. Who goes to Vegas in 26?
Well, I know you've got to make a decision early, okay?
Yeah.
But I wouldn't say if I was trying to sell rugby league to the world, this is part of the pitch, as you know, to go over there. I don't think I'd be taking the Dragons or the Knights over there, to be honest.
Kalen Ponga?
Well, let's hope he gets there. Yeah. Okay, but
plays well.
Well, yeah, but look, I just don't think that they're the guys.
Anyway, let's just back up from this. So we were going to Las Vegas because we were going to break into the American market. We were going to generate extra revenue through our cut of the gambling that happens on sport. And, but it would seem to me now that we are going to America, and this has been a success in America for different reasons than why we went there.
Well, Ben, I said this at the start, okay? Vegas is a great season opener, okay? It's always been bullshit to sit there and think that we're going to break into the American market. Rugby union, if you've ever been to America, is quite a well-followed game over there, yet it cannot crack a whisper on any of the sports
in terms of revenue generation.
Yeah, and revenue generation, but even in coverage and the way it's covered on this, you never see ESPN's pardon the interruption or anything, go to a rugby club and talk about any of that stuff. So for rugby league to think it was going to go over there, it was always bullshit. It was a Trojan horse to get over there and get into the American gambling market.
Yep.
That's what it was all about.
And do we still think that's what it's about?
It can't happen now because it's already been knocked back. The American, the way it works over there, the NRL tried to go over, get people interested in gambling on footy, and then went for a cut of turnover. And they've been knocked back on that. So it doesn't happen.
So we're going there now
as a
season opener, and you have to admit, on that basis, it has been successful because it sucks the oxygen out of every other sport at that time of year.
But I think we admit that, and there's nothing wrong with admitting that.
And so
that's true, though.
Let's go back to these Paul Kent guidelines around who should go and who shouldn't.
Right.
I'm fascinated by this.
Right.
So is this not?
Why wouldn't you take Melbourne?
But is this not more about the supporter base? Now that we know we're not trying to convert Americans, we're effectively rewarding the supporter bases of the Australian teams.
Yeah,
Dogs, Knights, Dragons, Cowboys all have huge supporter bases.
Yeah, but they're different. They're a different demographic than, say, the Broncos fans, or I would say Melbourne fans.
In what sense? They can't afford to go?
To be honest with you, yeah.
Okay.
Whether you can afford to get them all over there, like I think it's a big ask, particularly Bulldogs and St George Illawarra. I think that they're both from the same part of Sydney, to be honest. That might be more reason you might say you want to go. There'd be plenty of families, I imagine, do go over who support both. Chris Minns, for one, the Premier of New South Wales, he's a mad Bulldog fan, right in the heartland of St George Illawarra, where all his family are Saints fans. So
and look, with respect to the Bulldogs, didn't they sort of buy 20% of the tickets at
Yeah.
the game against the Raiders. So
Yeah.
if you go to Canberra, you go anywhere.
No, that's a fair call too. Look, I think I take that. I don't take it back against the Bulldogs. I just clarify the Bulldogs. The Bulldogs do travel. Okay, they're probably one club to do, and they had a questionnaire earlier this year to the fans, and 8,000 there indicated that they would be willing to go to Las Vegas if they are chosen to go. So that's fair enough. And look, they're leading the competition.
Yeah.
So there's everywhere you look with the Bulldogs is a tick. I'm not so sure that if I'm trying to sell the game or trying to even promote the game, that the other three clubs, Cowboys could or could not be there. But do you want the Knights and the Dragons to be your season opener?
Look, I don't think it's about who goes. I think it's about where it gets played. So let's put a bow tie on this conversation. Are you glad that Peter V'landys and the NRL had the gumption to take on this Las Vegas challenge? You glad we went there?
Well, I think it's deviated from the original intent. The original intent was not to go over there and just,
But
and
that's
have
okay, isn't it?
Well, that's good, yeah. Just be honest about it now.
All right, let's dive deeper into the Dogs. They're on top of the ladder, playing outstanding football. It's taken a couple of years, but as you'd expect, Phil Gould is starting to have his way with that organisation. It started with employing a great young coach in Cameron Ciraldo, who, once the roster was built in his image and they started to get used to his style and bite down on his game model, clearly all those ingredients are coming together now.
Yeah, it's all working for the Bulldogs. The interesting thing I think about them is Jacob Carraz was there when Trent Barrett was there, and he's one of only 3 or 4 left in the whole club from that period. They've turned over so many players.
Yeah.
And they've had players who came in, stayed for a cup of tea, and then are no longer there as well. It shows the model of what can be done, how you can take a club from last in 2021 to leading the competition now, and it's fascinating. The fascinating part, I think, to it all, and I wouldn't know what you think about that. Is how you go. Yeah, why other clubs can't pick up on that model? How you can't look at. Okay, this is what's happened at the Bulldogs. This is how they've turned over their roster. They've found good players. They've kept the good players that they needed to. They've moved on players that couldn't do the system. Ciraldo, I've told this story, but he got in. He put his footprint down. This is how we're going to play. And when they couldn't aim up some of the players, Gould went to him and said, "Mate, maybe you need to change this a little bit. You got to. They're not getting it. It's not working." Instead of staying with, okay, guys, let's go back to what we were doing and sort of, just being moderate.
He adapted.
Well, he said, mate, he stuck in. He said, we're going to do it this way. We're going to keep playing this way, and we'll figure out. And he said to Gould, aren't we better off finding out who can do it and who can't? And the ones that can't do it, let's get rid of them. And the ones that can do it are the ones we know we can keep. So that's what they've done, and that's why they've turned over so many players. And they've got they are the best defensive team in the comp. I don't know whether that adds out and actually tries conceded, but certainly they're the best defensive team the way they are working at the moment.
Yeah.
They've had a couple of little blowouts lately, but
ultimately they're biting down on how Cameron Ciraldo wants his team to play, right?
Exactly.
Pardon the pun.
Yeah.
Look, the lessons I got from the couple of years at the Broncos is that, as you know, my hobby horse was roster management before I even got control of one, was that traditionally when you're building a roster is that you've always gone into the market mainly looking for 2 things: capability, can they play, and character, are they a good person?
Yeah.
But what I learned is the third more important category is compatibility. Do they fit?
Yeah.
And do they fit with the head coach you've got?
Yeah.
Because that's the multiplier effect. That gives you the compounding effect that you're getting great teams. Because ultimately what you do is you get alignment, is you've got a coach who knows how he wants to play. He knows what standards he wants to keep around the organisation. He has the courage to show everybody. And then over time, you give everyone in your roster the chance to have a look at those values, those standards, and how that team's going to play. And they either buy in or you've got to move them out. And I think that's what Gus and Cameron Ciraldo have been doing over the last couple of years. And what you're left with is a whole heap of people, this is staff included, who want to go after the same thing in the same way.
Yeah, and that's where the recruitment of particularly Stephen Crichton as the captain, but also Kickow and Burton, who had experience with Serraldo at Penrith. He knew what they were capable of. He knew where their values were, where their character was, how they would fit in there. And so he got Burton and Kickout along early. And then when Crichton turned up last year, he was just that last element who was able to take everything the coach is thinking and actually take it out onto the field. And, I've spoken to Serraldo about that. He said, he said the thing with Critter, which is what he calls him, it's his nickname, obviously. He said, is all the things I think as a coach. He said, because I've had so long with him. He said all that. He said he's saying it as the player.
Yeah.
So his teammates are hearing it.
Well, he's got an extension of himself.
Yeah.
Inside the playing group.
Yeah.
On the shop floor.
Yeah.
And most specifically and importantly, inside the 80 minutes.
But the trick where this all goes, though, Ben. Okay, you look at this. So the Bulldogs have done that, and they've gone from last in 2021. Okay, and they've leading the competition now. Now they're a long way from having actually done anything significant yet. To be fair, like. One, great to be leading the comp, but two, they haven't won a comp yet. But they're certainly heading that way. But you've had the West Tigers who've got the last 3 wooden spoons. You've got other teams like St George Illawarra who've been sort of languishing down thereabouts over the years. So what are they missing in that? And how are they missing the examples that the Bulldogs and even Penrith, to be fair, before Gould sort of arrived out there and he had brought along Ivan Cleary and all the rest of it. They were a team that was struggling as well sort of find out their identity.
And Gus went through some churn on the staff too. He had, I think, Matt Elliott, then he went to Ivan Cleary, then he went to Anthony Griffin, then Ivan Cleary comes back, right? And look, you like to think it's all going to happen deliberately, but the longer I'm in and around this game and now being back on the other side, what's becoming really clear to me, that in all high-performing teams, high-performing organisations, it's not important what you stand for. What's important is that you get a whole heap of people in the building who stand for the same thing.
Yeah.
Because there are so many teams that have success doing it so many different ways. Bennett does it different from Belichick. Kerr does it different from Cleary.
Yeah.
But what happens is that you've got a critical mass of individuals, as I said before, who are all going after the same thing in the same way.
Yeah.
It's how you get the alignment and the trust. And you heard that saying growing up. A champion team will always beat a team of champions.
Yeah, but the trick though is as we go into the future with the NRL, is they've got the Bears coming into the competition, and they're going to have to start from scratch essentially. And then a year later, you're going to have Papua New Guinea coming into the competition, and they're going to have to try and build a club as well.
Yeah.
So the model has almost been presented there for them about how you start to go about all that.
Yeah, look, footy clubs operate at their best when they're run from the inside out. So start with the football program, and then you build staff and boards around the core business.
Yeah.
Because it's the rugby league part of what you do that has to inform the rest of the organisation. So if I'm going to Perth, I'm almost locking down red-hot senior staff from football programs that effectively come together to create the environment that the players step into. And if you've got a good group of senior staff inside the footy program, when they go to market and they're selling to players and their agents, they know that they're going to come to an environment with good people. Because these days, what players are chasing is they want to go somewhere where they're learning, they're growing, and ultimately winning. And that's where the good clubs get the competitive advantage in the market, right? So they take their $12 million, the good clubs, and they turn it into $15 million.
Yeah.
And they do it because good players will come to their club for less, and the good players will stay at their club for less.
And
the bad clubs, conversely.
And they'll also turn the players in from a $400,000 a year worth player to a $500,000 or $600,000 a year, the way he's going down there. Yeah, that's a club.
And look, I'm going to use this as my assessment of the Melbourne Storm. The Melbourne Storm under Craig Bellamy and Frank Panisi are very clear on what the Melbourne way is.
Yeah.
And so there's this misnomer that everyone that goes to Melbourne becomes a better player. I don't think that's accurate. I think what they've developed down there is a very tight recruitment screening process where they don't let anybody into Melbourne who's not going to buy in, who's not going to work. So you go there as the $150,000 low value player, as long as you've got, traits 1, 2, 3, and 4, and you pass the coffee test with Craig, and then you arrive, and because they know what they're looking for, you jump into that environment, you feel like you've got the same values and the same standards as the rest of the team, so you enjoy it, you work hard, and then ultimately win.
Yeah. But the old guy does get through that doesn't sort of quite cut it either.
Yeah, but they're not going to get it right all the time.
Yeah.
They reject them pretty quick.
Yeah, they soon figure a way to get rid of them too. Is the other part to it.
Now, listen, we're moving off the dogs and we're getting into the rep arena. I'm currently well and truly got my head in State of Origin as the CEO of the QRL.
You're down here to watch your women play?
I am. We've got to try and recover a series. We're 0-1. We're coming off the back fence. The Origin eligibility generally is a conversation that gets held around the men. So while we're excited about being in the middle of the women's series, let's go there. It's been a talking point for a month or so.
Herbie Farnworth came out saying that he'd like to play Origin.
Yep.
Yeah, which has got the conversation going again. Yeah, and it's a conversation. Oh, look, everyone knows that we're mates and we talk about this stuff all the time, but we'll sort of get it going again. But the fact is, the NRL, and I spoke about this on the show, I reckon maybe 2 months ago. The NRL is quietly having a look at Origin eligibility and how they try to reshape it going into the future to try and, in their mind, I think, stay relevant. The part that worries me, though, is that how much of it's to stay relevant and how much is it just to try and please everybody. The NRL has this compulsion that they want everybody to be happy, and that's just to do with the referees. But basically, they try to please everybody. So right now, they are considering whether they should allow Tier 1 nations, England and New Zealand, to be able to play State of Origin football. Now, that would mean Herbie Farnworth, who is proudly English, would be able to play. It means in the past, blokes like Sam Burgess and James Graham would be allowed to play Origin. Okay, if this, which I understand is what they are leaning towards.
Yeah, which would corrupt the integrity of what Origin is all about.
But Ben, this is where someone like you, I don't know, have they approached you about this?
Look, I had a email exchange with Wayne Pearce, which I think I started maybe last year, on the basis that this was being talked about at commission level, because ultimately, no matter what they change the rules to, if they loosen them in particular, you need to take the state leagues on the journey because we pick the teams.
Yeah.
So if they open this up to players that born in England, already played for England and come out to have a stint in the NRL, like Sam Burgess or James Graham, the Blues and the Maroons would have a conversation and decide. If we decide that's off the table, then we don't select them in the teams. So
wouldn't you be open for legal action, though?
What's that?
Would you be open for legal action?
No.
It goes back to 95, actually. Remember there's legal action back then.
We pick the teams. Yeah. So ultimately, the team has to be selected in the image of the coach we've got and the standards that both the state leagues have. So here's my take on it. I think it's at a point now where we need to separate international eligibility from State of Origin eligibility. Yeah. So you can come in and have a conversation and go through a process where you either you are eligible for Origin or you are not. And at the moment, you have to be in either Queensland or New South Wales before the age of 13 and playing in your football in one of those two states. Yeah. Right? That's how you are eligible. So if you are Adrian Lamb with PNG heritage, but you learnt your craft in Queensland, or you're Petro Sivanasiva, who has Fijian heritage, but you are absolutely a Queenslander, you qualify to play for the Maroons, then you should be able to play for Queensland and then go over here with a separate body and figure out who you're going to play for internationally.
But that's what they tend to do now, the Tier 2 nations, because like you look at Crichton and Luai and current Origin players.
But Victor Radley might be the better example, right? You're talking about Herbie Farnworth, who wasn't here before the age of 13. So he might have a passion to play Origin because he loves the product, but he wouldn't qualify. But Victor Radley, who I think has parents born in England, but he was born here in New South Wales. Yeah. learned his craft here, on
played
the
for
eastern
Coogee
suburbs.
Crocodiles or
That's
something
exactly
too,
right.
didn't he?
Then you
But
can't tell me that he wouldn't be passionate about playing for the Blues.
Of course he would. But I don't have a problem with Victor Radley playing Origin. I'd like him to. But that's not what they're looking at doing. What they're looking at doing is allowing the likes of Sam Burgess and James Graham and Herbie Farnworth got the Queensland when he was 14, so he only just missed out. But to allow them to come and play, what they don't understand is whatever makes Origin work, if you start opening it up to this, because what's driving it is this nervousness, which the NRL haven't got the brain capacity to work their way through at the moment, is this rugby league's Origin series was always billed as the best against the best. And now you can sort of sit back and you say, well, hang on, we've opened the competition up so much, okay, as far as players from other countries coming and the amount of Kiwi players we've got here. And then on top of that, now you've got players who are committing to the Tier 2 nations like Samoa and Tonga that.
Yeah.
So when obvious players miss out, say, for example, Sam Burgess doesn't play in that game, the argument is, well, how do you bill it as the best against the best when a guy like him, who's clearly one of the best props in the world, was the best prop in the world,
isn't playing?
But that's the bullshit argument that they're falling for. That shouldn't be the priority. Origin, for whatever reason, works. Origin's got this magic dust sprinkled on it, okay? And if you open it up to the mercenaries, guys who just want to play Origin because they've heard it's a good game of footy and they'd like to be involved, then you can't blame them. You can't blame a Sam Burgess or James Graham for saying, I'd love to have played Origin.
Yeah.
But by the same token, you don't get those moments with those guys. And I'm kind of a little bit the same way with some of these guys who are pledging their allegiance to the Tier 2 nations. You don't get those experiences like Tom did when he finally gets told he's going to start. And he gets so choked up, he just sits there and tears come to his eyes and he can't talk to Billy Slater about it because it meant so much to him to do that.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's, if you open it up to the mercenaries, the guys who just want to test their footy toughness, who just want to experience what Origin's like, also don't mind the 30 grand pickup for the match fees. If you start doing that, you're going to start to lose it. And the problem with it is the consequence of if you get this decision wrong. And I don't know if the NRL are looking through that heavy enough. If you get this wrong, you say, okay, let's try it. And you go and you watch Origin for 5 years, totally screw it up. Can you then say, you know what, we've buggered it up here. The product's just about dead. Can you go back? Could you think we can go back?
No, look, I don't think it'll get there.
Because you guys won't pick the team.
No, but there's too many sensible people that won't allow the mercenaries to take part in it.
Why is the NRL even doing this then?
I think, look, even though I don't agree with the principle that they're considering at the moment, I think in the world of sound corporate governance, you have to consider all things all the time. And everything that gets considered in rugby league is going to find its way into the public domain.
Yeah.
And so once, popular opinion and even private considered opinion gets to the NRL and it becomes overwhelming that would be a stupid idea, I don't think they'll go down that path. But you have to admit, and it's challenging for me because Peter V'landys' leadership style is not my leadership style.
Yeah.
I move slow. I'm considered. I like to think things through. He's a big dreamer. He's a force of nature. And he's taken, the things that he's done well in racing, which is creating big, new, shiny things that gets everyone hooked in. And you cannot deny that approach has been good for our game.
Yeah, well, it's Vegas.
And so we can't sit here and then laud him for taking that approach to every other part of the game and then shoot him down if he applies the same principles to Origin. And then over time, the other smart people in the room, give him a bit of context around where Origin came from and what the important elements are. And I think he sees sense and this ends up in a good spot. Overall, I think we're in agreement here.
Yeah, I tend to agree. Like I just worry about him sometimes in there, mate. Honestly, some of the times the things that get done, I get what you say about Pete. Like, he's a friend of mine and he does these things and against all odds, they work. You know what I mean? Like what he's done in the racing was magnificent. And I do like the way they've been slightly able to pivot slightly with the whole
genius.
We started going to Vegas because we we're going to put a team on the West Coast, remember? We were thinking, the early dialogue all out of the NRL back then was that they were going to have a team, maybe looking to put a team at Los Angeles or San Diego. Mate, we bitch and moan about flying to New Zealand for 4 hours or 2.5 hours it takes. Imagine getting on a 12-hour flight. Imagine the turnarounds we'd have then.
Listen, I used to host a TV show with a great journo who once said to me that every journalist is entitled to change their position with new information.
That's true. So let's change.
Move on from eligibility and this upcoming men's Origin series.
Yeah, you blokes in trouble.
You think so?
You know what's interesting? Look, I don't think you're in trouble from the point of view that Queensland just always seem to find a way. And the worst, mate, New South Wales are at their worst when they're favourites. Okay, I don't know why. New South and Queensland are at their best when they're underdogs.
You don't think they are this year, the Blues favourites?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah,
I think they should be too. But the difference, the concern for Queensland is you've got players out of form. You've got Ben Hunt's injured now.
Isn't that the Origin legend from Queensland?
I know that. I'm just waiting for some bloke to get plucked out of reserve grade. Okay.
And captain the side at 35.
but it's got to be a concern for Billy at the moment. He's got to be a little like he's Ponga's not playing well. Daly Cherry Evans is not playing well. Like they're going to be the halfback and fullback.
Yep.
He's going to have Harry Grant coming off an extended break. He might get one game in this weekend, and it's a hamstring at that. So there's 3/4 of your spine there who you've got little question marks over, and you've probably got Munster playing well. You can have that.
I agree. We're right up against it, Queensland.
but okay. So talk to me then from a Queensland point of view. How do you turn that round in camp? How do Queenslanders get this reserve graders, players out of form? Wally Fullerton-Smith gets plucked out of reserve grade to play, plays enormous. You got players in recent years that just step up and do the job.
Because you know as well as I do is that we are very well balanced up there. We carry a chip on both shoulders. Yeah. It's just this thing that gets in our bones, for a couple of months every year was born out of this period in the game where we could not beat New South Wales and they were picking Queenslanders to do the job on us until Origin came around. So
does Billy do anything different though?
All I'm saying is that the connection between those who wear the maroon jersey and those that are coaching those who wear the maroon jersey this year because they used to wear it themselves, it's bordering on spiritual, and by the time you get back up into Queensland, if your form is not great, if you're not playing your best, being mindful that Kalen Ponga is one hell of a player, as is Harry Grant, right? And Daly Cherry, right? That they are world class. They're not
That's why they've been.
They're not just making the side and out of form at the same team. They're world class players, and my sense is that once they get into that different environment. And Billy reminds them, about what Origin means to Queenslanders, who they're playing for, gives them a fresh environment to step into. It'll re-energise them. And then, like it is every year, when both teams are at their best, this thing, as you know, is just a toss of a coin.
The whole Origin build-up, the whole Origin folklore. When you said then, that he'll get in there, remind them what it means to be a Queensland, play for Queensland. Is that an annual thing in camp? Is that something that happens every year that you get up and there's a night or an event or something happens?
It changes from coach to coach. Each coach does it differently, but certainly Billy was part of the Mel regime as a player.
Yeah.
Who did it really well. I remember. You remember we had this conversation with Mel on the show we used to do together, and he spoke about emotional triggers.
Yeah,
right?
That's right.
And so Billy will be a different coach to Mel, but he will absolutely know that he needs to connect that playing group into something bigger than themselves. It might be a bit of history. He might go back to Game 2 last year.
Yeah.
And remind them, where we went wrong and, that how we lost that game was not a Queensland performance. And then how they refocused and got back where they needed to be for Game 3. And even though we lost that Game 3, that was one hell of a game. They could have gone either way. And they remembered what it takes to win an Origin game. So there'll be a combination of ingredients that Billy rolls out along the camp. He'll set a theme. He would have picked that already with Nate Miles, Jonathan Thurston. and Matty Ballin, the rest of the
Yeah.
coaching staff, and then whatever that looks like, it will be about making this more than just 3 games of football.
Do you reckon Michael Maguire got in his head last year, Billy?
I don't think so.
Remember the glass houses?
Yeah, no, I don't. Look, I don't think so. No, I'm not in camp.
Yeah.
My assessment on where it went wrong last year was based on some conversations I had with Bill. I think we maybe got a false sense of self off the back of game 1.
Yeah.
I don't know if you remember back after Reece Walsh got KO'd.
I was with you, remember?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
And that
Caused
scoreline
a ruckus, that, didn't it?
that scoreline ran out in favour of Queensland, but
Yeah.
New South Wales played really tough
Yeah.
with 12 men for a long period of time.
Yeah.
But ultimately Queensland racked up a lot of tries.
Yeah.
And so we went into game 2 confident, and I think maybe just forgot the type of footy that wins Origin games, and that was corrected very quickly after game 2.
So I wonder, last year when Maguire came out with that glass houses comment after game 1 when Sully took out Reece Walsh, and he came out and everyone was like, what's he talking about? What's he mean? Who's he referring to? All the rest of it. He was referring to Billy. 100% he was referring to Billy. And he was referring to Billy in regards to their relationship when they worked together at Melbourne, when he was an assistant coach at Melbourne and did a lot of work with the spine at the time. He used to work a lot of stuff with the spine. And Billy, despite his golden reputation in the game, was quite a dirty player in some respects. And, he took out numerous players with.
We can agree to disagree.
Yes,
yep.
I know.
Yep.
Well, I know. I don't.
He's my favourite player.
I know. I was back then too, but look, I don't expect you to agree or even comment on this because I know your position now you can't do it. But I got no doubt. I think what happened in that situation is when he said that, Billy got a sense of, I don't know where he could possibly go here with this, and I think it worried him a little bit because Billy's a combative type of guy, and Billy.
You say combative, I say competitive.
Competitive,
Yep.
well, yes, but it's not Billy's nature to just leave it alone. Like Billy's got that little bit of mongrel in him. That he likes to,
and we like, and his players like.
Yeah, but he didn't in this case. He didn't. He just flat battered it the whole way through. And I thought that's because I wondered whether it's like Muhammad Ali when he went after Sonny Liston. He said, because the one thing a tough man's afraid of is the crazy man, and Ali acted crazy to try and get Liston off his game. And I think when Maguire came out with his little comment about that, Billy, knowing what Maguire knows, given their history, was wondering, well, how far is he willing to take this? And I don't know if Billy was prepared to go down
let me
that
ask
line.
you this then. That was last year, right?
Yeah.
So based on the Billy Slater you've seen and come to know
Yeah.
over his journey as a player and now a coach,
Mm.
do you think if he did get that wrong, he's learned his lesson?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
That's what terrifies me. And the thing is, though, you know what's going to be interesting, though? I think we're going to see a different Laurie Daly this time too. Like Laurie's got a little bit of steel in him this time, and just the way he's spoken about a couple of things that we all know Laurie's the world's nicest bloke, and Laurie is unfailingly polite to people and will go out of his way to make you feel comfortable. And I think in this series we'll see a slightly different Laurie, or we'll see the Laurie, the player that we used to see, where he used to just sit there and line someone up and say, mate, you know what? It's you or me and it's going to be you. You know what I mean?
Bring on Origin.
So, but I do. But that said, though, he's spoiled for choices at the moment, Laurie. He's got 5 fullbacks he could easily pick to play fullback.
Yeah, he only needed one though.
Yeah, I know, but
Yeah.
that's
Right.
Well, we can't run out 25 players.
Or
but,
25 fullbacks,
yeah,
right? That's
exactly.
Yeah.
But he's lucky. He's Reece Robson's a little bit of a cloud over him at hooker, but he's half clear. He's flying. He's got Mitch Moses, Jerome Luai there, whichever one's. I think he'll go Luai. Not that you care about any of this. I can see you're already just starting to drop off.
Glazing over.
Yeah.
Let's chat about the Blues. Seriously.
Okay, but I think he's got and that's often a danger period for New South Wales, to be fair, when they are travelling so well.
Yeah, look,
into Origin.
I'm glad Laurie's got another crack at the Origin thing. He is a competitor. In my mind, he will take a very similar approach to Billy, you know, because they're not deep on experience in NRL coaching. But the thing that also worries me as a Queenslander is they've got Craig Bellamy and Frank Panisi, sitting in the background, and all I know is that we're going to have to be very good to beat them. I want to move past Origin and go back. We touched on it before as we were talking on the building of footy programs, and spill into expansion because we touched on the Bears.
Yeah.
And the master plan hasn't been made clear about where we're going and when. It's just kind of been one decision after the other.
Right. And
we're in Port Moresby in 28 and we're going to Perth in 2027. But inside that 2027 announcement was our old club, the Mighty Bears, getting a start again. Yeah.
Mate, the NRL a bit like those, those old, really old, country homes where, if you need a room, you just build a room on the side and you just keep doing that and just keep adding. That's what they're doing. There's no seeming plan or layout or whatever about how you're going to make this competition look. But we need the Bears, so we'll put the Bears back in. Why, for the life of me, they've gone from 17 to 19 in the space of a couple of years.
It's going to be a massive project. You're effectively going to have to reach down into the game and find 80 players and 50 staff. And it
for a game that many are already arguing is already stretched.
It's a bit diluted.
Yeah.
And the other thing that's going to make it challenging is that unlike the Dolphins, these are new franchises. The Dolphins had the bones of something great there waiting. A long history, very wealthy, and it had been built around the core business of rugby league, where these things are new. And one's in another country and the other's on the other side of the country, and they're not just going to have a free crack at whoever they want. They're going to be in the market, the two of them, at the same time, competing with 17 other clubs who all want the best staff and the best players as well.
Do you think the NRL should take a leaf out of what happens overseas, where when they have an expansion team come into a competition, which they haven't done in any of the major sports in, say, America for a while, but when they do there, what they do is they allow every team to basically protect a certain amount of players, that these are the players that we've got protected, but everybody else is fair game for you to negotiate with. So if players at the moment, you're not allowed to negotiate. So this is the hard part of how these two franchises are going to get going. Because, and the Dolphins, I felt sorry for them, the way that they were allowed to negotiate. They had to basically try and wait until, under the current rules, players came off on November 1 of the last year of the last year.
November 1 of the last year of the contract.
Yeah, and or seek permission, okay? I think they should be given fair crack to go after players at every club, but the clubs are allowed to, for example, if you're, the Broncos, you could say, well, okay, well, we'll protect, I don't know who they go for, Payne Haas will protect Reece Walsh, maybe 4 or 5 players in each club, and then let you have free swing at everybody else. Because otherwise, the worst thing that's going to happen is if these two franchises come in, and they've both got the different problems, to be honest. Like, Perth are going to go over there. They're going to come into a hostile environment with the local media. They're going to have to try and convince people to go over there. Now, once people move to Perth, it's going to be a nice environment to live in. Papua New Guinea's got the opposite. They've got an environment that love rugby league. They're obsessed with rugby league. But how are you going to convince a young player, 22, 23 years old, to go and live in another country? And, mate, when you come to this country, we're going to build a compound, which still hasn't even been built yet, hasn't even been told whether they're going to build it yet. We're going to put you in a compound, and, mate, basically, because the place is so dangerous outside this fence, you're not allowed to go there.
Yeah.
So this young guy's going to be sitting in his house. He plays Friday night. All weekend he sits in his house because he's got nowhere to go because he's living in a compound.
Yeah, it's going to be challenging. And look,
you can't convince a player to go there.
But let's not forget, the mining and resources industry is built around, expats who are over there for a specific professional reason and have found a way to make it work. So we're not the first industry going to PNG and trying to crack this code. I know it's a different demographic.
Yeah, but leagueies are a lot more pampered than miners. You know what I mean? They're going to expect a better standard of living than a bloke that's been working in the mines.
I've been to PNG half a dozen times since I've been in this role, and they live pretty well over there, the miners.
Yeah. Well, but
I get it.
We're probably talking about areas we can't talk about, but I just don't know how you're going to convince them.
Well, I don't know why they took the Cairns thing off the table. I know they thought it was going to bite into the Cowboys market, but I would have had the training base in Cairns.
Yeah.
ensuring that the PNG franchise had no presence above the line. So there was no advertising, no promotion. It was just a place to live and train, and you flew in and out of Cairns, at least up until which time you started to lift the capability of local staff. So you had more locals flooding into the PNG franchise, more local players as well. And then the number of expats that you're going to need to get that thing going at the start was no longer an issue. So start in Cairns, build the thing, just fly in and out for the home games. And I think in the early stages, the local fans, even the local government and those that invest in that team, they would be comfortable with that.
I've spoken to a couple of player managers though about it, and I've asked them about whether there's been even a nibble around getting some of their players over there for that. And mate, they are convinced that they are going to struggle to get players. Players don't want to go there because of the lifestyle, because you live in a compound. Now, they as part of the bid, they said they'd build a compound. They're going to spend 150 million, 160 million.
Yeah, I've seen the sites. I've been there. I've driven around the
but
town.
They still haven't identified what site. They haven't laid a brick yet, and they're going to start in 2028.
Yeah, so November 1, 2027
is what.
That's the start of the preseason for the 28 season. Yeah.
And that's 2 years away. Just over 2 years away. They have not laid a brick for this compound. And it can't be just 25 houses for 25 staff, 25 players. It's supposed to be a whole suburb with all that you need.
And forget that, we're also going to have a team that's been dragged into the market ahead of Port Moresby, also trying to recruit from the same pool.
Exactly.
Yeah. It's a big project. And look, here's the thing, Kenny. This is where the game's going to have to be very mature, which rugby league is not famous for.
It won't happen,
if we want to get to 20 teams, but if we, at a minimum, want to make teams 18 and 19 work, then the other 17 clubs and even the state leagues to a lesser degree are all going to have to come together and support this happening. There'll be some form of exemptions that need to be given.
How do they make it?
It's about potentially having a loosening of the football department cap to attract good staff over there.
Yeah, and allowing people to actually go in and negotiate with players under contract. Those clubs, if they're not allowed to negotiate with players under contract, they are buggered.
Yeah,
they are.
And as long as there's complete transparency, from the new franchises, you have to contact the existing clubs. You are right, because this thing's going to come at us so quick. Yeah,
and because the other part to it, and if they don't go down and actually understand this, and to your point, show some maturity as to where they, how they navigate through this, if 18 and 19 do not succeed on the footy field, and in 5 years' time, in 2032 and 2033, they're running 18th and 19th. It'll backfire. It'll eventually eat the competition. They'll eat themselves. They'll go out the back door.
Yep.
Particularly Perth. If Perth doesn't show some kind of success early on, Papua New Guinea fans will tolerate because they've got their team. If you're not successful, it's like Melbourne. Melbourne was crucial when Melbourne came in the comp in '98 that they were successful, and the smart people back then made the decision. Whereas every other team that came in '95, when the Cowboys, the Warriors, and the Perth Reds came in '95, and the Crushers in '95, they didn't get a lot of help. Okay, but and they learned their lesson from that. So then when Melbourne started in '98, they said, okay, they need help here, and basically they got Brett Kamali, Scott Hill, Tawera Nikau, Glenn Lazarus, and the Super League clubs back then released their players to Melbourne. Canterbury released a couple to Melbourne. So they came in guns blazing because it would have been a disaster putting a poor team in Melbourne. And to be fair, we still don't know how Melbourne rugby league fans will ever react if they have a dud team because they've never had one.
Yeah.
They've made the semi since 2006.
Won a premiership 2 years in, and there's been consistency every year thereafter.
Yeah, and so they've always been competitive. But if Perth is not competitive, they're dead in the water.
Yeah.
And they've got to be competitive immediately.
Listen, look, and to go back to my point earlier, in both these organisations, you have to start with the core business first. Build two really strong footy programs. I just know this is a truism in our game, and get those clubs winning as often as you can, as early as possible, and the rest of it will take care of itself. Do you think, though, let's kind of go bigger picture again, that the game is in a healthy state at the moment.
Yeah, I think it's in a good state. Yeah. There's two ways to look at it. As a business, yes, it's flying. Yeah, and my concern for the game is my concern. I said this to Devanlandis when he first got in the job. I said it to him before he got in the job, and I still maintain it today. Is AFL is continually just encroaching into rugby league territory, and we have this blind spot to it. We don't acknowledge it. We don't spend the money that they're spending. I've told you this, but I'll tell the people who are listening. I wrote a story in 1994, right? And I only remember because Jeff Carr was quoted, and I was talking to him about it, some time back. And back then, the AFL was spending $6 million a year on development in country New South Wales and country Queensland. And the Swans were not going flash. They'd had their odd moment, okay? Giants weren't even thought of back then. And I remember speaking to Carr at the time, and he said, look, mate, they're kidding if they think they'll ever take over rugby league, okay? Now, that was $6 million a year that they were spending. Rugby league was spending 1.5 in the same areas. And we've never fixed that. We've never acknowledged that. But the one truth that has come out since then is that AFL has grown exponentially in both these main rugby league states. And we're not answering that challenge.
Oh, that's not accurate. I absolutely...
You look at the grounds, Ben. 30 years ago, you didn't see an
AFL
AFL
I look
ground.
at the grounds. I've got the QRL infrastructure strategy.
How many AFL grounds you looking at?
I know and understand the landscape. I can tell you right now, from a Queensland perspective, we have 2 Origin teams, male and female, 4 NRL teams, 3 NRLW teams, 15 Queensland Cup sides that each run 6 teams, 3 male, 3 female. So sub-elite.
How's your junior footy going though?
Yeah, continues to grow every year. We have 356 clubs.
It's not New South Wales.
For 70,000. Mate, New South Wales numbers are growing every year.
Only because you're including women in them.
No. Women.
A couple of years ago, all the New South Wales junior leagues reduced except for Penrith and North Sydney.
You're wrong. The women's game is growing more than the men's, yes. But the men's game is growing. And that's true.
In numbers, participation numbers.
Yes, it is.
I want to see details.
It is. And look, here's the other thing, is we all go rabbit on about, what they do with Auskick and these other elements that they're trying to introduce.
Which is a smoky.
Let me tell you, if you are playing touch football, OzTag, TRL, whatever form of non-contact you are playing at the moment, what sport do you think in your head you're playing?
Rugby league.
Yeah. And when you add our non-contact participants with our growing full contact participation base before we get into schools,
devil's in the detail there.
The community is huge. Like, I'm going to say it again, 2 Origin teams, 4 NRL teams, 3 NRLW teams, 15 statewide competition clubs with 6 teams each, with 356 community clubs underneath it. Rugby league in Queensland is one, daylight second.
Why are bush clubs folding then?
Because the bush is not the same as what it used to be. The same is true.
But where do they eventually come from then? Where do these players come from?
The same place that they move to when they move out of the bush, the city. So the metro areas are growing in population. The bush is not what it was. Like, I go into regional Queensland. I did a trip to Mount Isa a couple of years ago, and they talk about the Foley Shield. I had a mate who worked in a bank in Cairns who moved to Mount Isa because he wanted to be part of the Mount Isa Rugby League community. I went back there a couple of years ago. Now, most of the people who work in Mount Isa fly in and fly out.
Yeah.
The shifts used to be 8 hours, now they're 12 hours. This is the changing landscape in the bush. And look, don't get me wrong, that's the thing that keeps me up at night in my role, is making sure we deliver the right support for our volunteers. There's 20,000 of them.
Yeah.
Right? And we can't replace them. You're good at math. 20,000, 4 hours a week, $25 an hour, 30 weeks a year. That's $60 million. We can't pay people to do the work
of the
volunteers.
Look, they've always run on volunteers.
Yeah.
But the game...
I'm telling you, just take it from someone who works in the grassroots, who works closely with the New South Wales Rugby League. The game is healthy right the way down. Are there clubs that are challenged today in the bush in a way that they weren't 20 years ago? Yes. But that can be said for the rest of the community in the same town.
Yeah. But you also drive in some of those communities. You drive into Orange now. There's an AFL ground there where there never used to be one.
I'll tell you, there are more towns in regional New South Wales and Queensland where the rugby league club is the last strong community sporting organisation.
Yeah, well, that's healthy to know.
It is. This has been fun.
Oh, more for you than me.
Have I just beat up on you? Mate, great to see you.
You too, mate.
Thanks for having me in.
Pleasure.
And there it is, a wrap on another episode of Kenty Blitz.